All right, folks, what is up? Welcome back to another episode of the Help Me Understand podcast. I'm your host, Coach JK, and we are kicking off a fitness, nutrition, training adjacent episode. We're actually going to do a little bit of a Q&A today. I've got 3 questions that came my way over the past couple of weeks here. So I'll spend a few minutes here breaking down some perspective and some thoughts in the answers to those questions. We are going to be talking about collagen protein. Does that count the same as regular protein? We're going to talk about how many days per week someone can work out and still see results. And then we are going to discuss, the other question was, how do I stop feeling guilty for taking rest days? So before getting into those questions, as always, I want to say thank you for choosing to press play on the Help Me Understand podcast. You have no shortage of podcast content that you can consume. So I truly never take it for granted, ever, that you chose to press play on Help Me Understand. I would appreciate if you find this episode to be impactful, informative, anywhere in between that, in any way that you share this episode with a friend, coworker, family member, gym buddy, long lost, somebody from the past, somebody you don't like, just anybody. If you want to share this episode with them, and even better yet, if you hop on to whatever podcasting platform you are listening to this on, or perhaps watching on YouTube, and leave a comment, review, rating, like, whatever the case may be. I would sincerely appreciate it. Okay, let's get into today's content. So if you are not aware, there is a link in the show notes, and I have had a few issues with some of the stuff in the show notes recently as far as links and things like that. So if it's not showing up in the show notes, you can always shoot me a DM on Instagram at Coach JK McLeod. That's MCLEOD. Or you can also just email me directly, jk@jkmcleod.com. Either of those options works really well to get your question, your topic, suggestion, whatever the case may be, submitted. And although this particular one is going to be fitness, nutrition, and training adjacent, all the related things there, which is typically our rhythm on Tuesdays here on the Help Me Understand podcast, I'm certainly open to any suggestions for topics outside of the fitness realm. So keep that in mind. All right, let's dig into question number 1. So first question that I got was, does collagen protein count the same as regular protein? Should I track it? So in breaking this particular one down, first, collagen protein is different than your average protein. Typically, like a whey protein is what people are comparing it to if they're talking about something from a supplementation standpoint, or if we're comparing it to something like eating chicken, eating beef, eating fish, eating turkey, those sorts of things. So what collagen protein is it's protein that's actually sourced from the skin and bone and connective tissue of the animals themselves, which is different than the actual beef from a cow or the chicken from you guessed it, chicken. So it is not the same. So why I don't recommend counting collagen protein the same as regular protein. So my answer to this is no, that it doesn't count the same as regular protein. And as far as if you should track it or not, let me marinate on that for a minute. But the difference is that with collagen protein, it doesn't have the same amino acid profile as regular protein does. So regular protein, and when I say regular protein, what I'm talking is, say, like a whey protein, which would be a supplement, like most of your protein powders, meat, so things that are coming straight from the source. So again, we're talking chicken, beef, bison, turkey, just from animals. Also eggs too, a pretty decent source of protein. So collagen protein lacks all of the full amino acid profile, and I believe one of the specific proteins that it lacks, essential amino acids that it lacks, is leucine. So when you hear coaches and influencers and trainers saying that collagen is an incomplete protein, that's what they're talking about. So the difference between something that's a complete protein and something that's an incomplete protein is that a complete protein, which again, I'm just putting the header of regular protein under that, is something that will contain the full amino acid profile. So it also then is helping in muscle growth and muscle maintenance. So if your primary function, if we're going down the lane of really prioritizing muscle, so whether we're talking again the maintaining or the building of muscle, then collagen is not considered an effective protein for that particular purpose because it doesn't contain the full amino acid profile to do that. So that's the whole incomplete versus complete protein. So again, your things like whey, meat, eggs, those things are going to contain the full profile. So that's why they're not necessarily, or not, I shouldn't even say not necessarily, they're not counted the same as if you have like a shake, a protein, post-workout protein shake, if you have, steak dinner, things like that. So it shouldn't be counted the same. Now, where collagen is useful is for things like joint health and skin and connective tissue, because that's the source of the collagen protein itself. So what I would say is, again, no, I wouldn't count it the same as regular protein. And should you track it? That's totally up to you. What I would, where I've addressed this with my clients and to kind of recalibrate how I handle nutrition for my clients is more from an overall habit-based standpoint. Like, are you getting in protein regularly at 3 meals? Are you consistently consuming fruits and vegetables? How many servings are you getting on average throughout the day? Like, I call that more of a habit-based approach with, are you doing these things consistently versus assigning specific macronutrient profiles. It's something that I am very capable of doing. I have done it in the past. It's actually how I got started as a coach, and I have chosen to primarily get into the nitty-gritty when it comes to the training and the half-gritty when it comes to, that was really lame, but as my son would say, it sounded way better in my head. When it comes to the specific details and ins and outs of macro and micronutrients. So when I've worked with clients before and this question has come my way, and it does come my way every now and then, what I recommend to them is, first, let's take a look at how much protein are you getting in, how many servings are you getting in before you even factor the collagen protein in. So that would be my recommendation, as opposed to figuring out, like, does it count the same, or should I track it or not track it? First, let's look at your main protein sources and how much you're getting in from there and how many servings you're getting in from there. So let's come up with a number. Let's say that you are somebody who is aiming to get in 100 grams of protein per day. I'm just picking a number out of the air here. You're aiming to get in 100 grams of protein, and you've got like the Vital Proteins powder. I can't think of some of the other ones that are out there. I know First Form has a powder that's out there. And let's say that you put in a scoop, which is, let's say it's 10 grams. I'm again making this up. So let's say that that's 10 grams, and you put 1 scoop in your morning coffee, and then you also add a scoop to your workout shake. So that's 20 grams out of the 100 grams that you are looking to get in that's coming from an incomplete protein. If you know that your protein needs, or if you assume at least that your protein needs are 100 grams on average per day, then getting 20% of that from an incomplete protein, not really something that I would recommend. I would typically be on more of the under 10%, and that's not a hard and fast rule or anything like that. I would be putting more energy into getting an understanding of what can we do to get more bang for your buck from the complete proteins. Because remember, again, based on what I've shared with you around the difference between a complete protein and an incomplete protein, and why it's important to get those things, to get complete proteins in, because again, we're working on building and maintaining muscle mass, then we don't want to skimp on that particular portion. Now, if it happens to be that the collagen you are counting collagen and it puts you over, then cool, that's fantastic. Something else that I will mention too is I was actually in the grocery store. I think this was about a week ago, and I recorded this, and I'll post it at some point. It's sitting in my camera roll right now. I think that something that can lead to some of the confusion here too is the way that grocery stores merchandise their protein. Something that you may not be aware of is back in the day when I first went to college, I unfortunately dropped out and have still not finished. However, when I did go to college, my first declared major was in merchandising, or a minor was in merchandising. And after I left college, I continued to stay in the retail industry. And a big part of where I really spent a majority of my time was in merchandising. And although it was in soft lines, I worked at a grocery store for all of 6 months. That's a separate story. It's likely, I count that as the worst job that I've ever had in my entire life. And I'd be happy to share that story if anybody really cares. But when it comes to merchandising, whether you're merchandising what we call soft lines, which is clothing and fashion, which is where I spent a long time before switching over into hard lines, where I currently am, and I've been in for over a decade. Regardless of the types of products that you're merchandising, the basics of really well done merchandising are pretty much the same. And a big part of it is when you're looking at, let's just arbitrarily pick, like when you're looking at a 4-foot section, whether you're looking at a 4-foot wall in a clothing store, or you're looking at a 4-foot shelf on a in a grocery store on an end cap, which would be like the end of an aisle, that thing should pretty much tell you a story of these things go together. So if I pick out, I'll use the clothing example just because that's where I grew up and I spent so long up until about 10 to 12 years ago, both in clothing and shoes. So if I walk up to a 4-foot section and I see pants, then I should ideally see a jacket that goes with it, perhaps a shirt that goes with it, maybe even some accessories. I spent a lot of time in the women's fashion field. So it would be very much like, okay, well, you see this tank. Well, I see this tank, but then it looks like hanging off the end of this shelf or this tea stand, there's also a necklace. And I just happened to kind of pivot a little bit to my left, and there's a great pair of slides that go with that too. That stuff is not by accident. So bringing it back to this particular point, I was in the grocery store the other day, and as I'm in the supplement aisle, I'm looking at the whey protein and casein proteins, which are generally considered like pretty solid supplements if you're looking to supplement your overall protein intake. And then right next to those, and on many of them, the same shelf and similar brands, is also the collagen protein. So if you are like the individual who submitted this particular question, somewhat either confused or just kind of like, man, it just feels like the information is conflicting, then that's not completely all your fault. You also are being marketed to, and things are merchandised a particular way to make you think that, well, I'm assuming like protein, like it makes sense, even though the packaging says like hair, skin, nails, joint health, I think is pretty much the line that's on there now. If stores were merchandising things according to what they actually help, what the products actually do, then the whey protein would be in the supplement aisle and the collagen protein would be over in like the health and beauty aids aisle, like over near like the lotion and the beauty products. Like if we were doing things the way that the products were actually made. However, that's not the way that it goes. You try to influence people's buying patterns by the way that you merchandise things. So just a little aside there, just to keep in mind. So that was question number 1. Does collagen protein count the same as regular protein? To recap, no, it doesn't count the same. And as far as should you track it or not, that's totally up to you. At the end of the day, my strong recommendation would be, prior to trying to figure out does this count or for me or not, or should I track it or not, is first take a look at your overall protein intake and what percentage are you attempting to count on, pun intended, coming from an incomplete protein like collagen. All right. Next question. How many days per week can I work out and still see results? There was a little more information on this one. Here it was. Yeah. How many days per week can I work out and still see results? With the summer coming to an end, while there be more structure to our family schedule, I just know that there's going to be less days I can get into the gym. That context is extremely helpful. So, the first thing that I would say is first let's get an understanding of what you mean by results. So when it comes to results, are we talking fat loss? Are we talking getting stronger? Are we talking maintaining where we're at? So getting an understanding of exactly what you're talking about when you say still see results. However, let's just scope out and go with some general advice on this one. So how many days per week can I work out and still see results? So generally, old JK would start off with, okay, well, generally anywhere from 2 to 3 days per week, you're probably going to be in pretty good shape. Now, current JK, who tries to get a little bit more information if I've got access to someone, would one, get an understanding of what do you mean by results? So what phase are you in? What are we really focused on right now? And then two, talk to me about what your workouts look like. Something that I've come to really get a better understanding of is when somebody says that they're in the gym X number of days per week, that doesn't actually tell me how effective or ineffective their training might be, because it tells you nothing about the overall volume per session. And more importantly, if we scope out even wider, if I've got any fellow trainers and coaches that are here who do program design and really pay attention to these things, it tells us nothing about the average number of working sets that you do per week. So you may hear somebody say, I only train 2 to 3 days per week. Then you may look at their program and they're literally doing like 12 to 15 exercises on those particular days. And that can be the same amount of volume that somebody who's training 6 to 7 days per week. And don't get it twisted. Like there's definitely folks out there who train 6 to 7 days per week way back in the day before I really understood what was going on. I had no problem training 7 days a week. And the next question will actually relate to that. But all that to say, I'd take a look at first, when it comes to your schedule, my answer with how many days per week can you work out and still see results is going to be based on how many days per week can you currently train and for how long? Like what sort of time frame do we have? And let's get an understanding of what's your expectation when it comes to your training. So if we're training for something that's a little bit more of a mix of bodybuilding and also some athletic performance, then cool. If we're doing stuff that's more straight bodybuilding, and then you've got other stuff that's going on outside of the workouts, let's get an understanding of how you may be able to get in like your interval work or your zone 2 work and things like that outside of your quote unquote like planned workouts. I would generally say for most people though, if you can keep a consistent, let's say 10, this can range like 10 to 17-ish sets per week per muscle group in your volume. And you can usually do that with pretty effective programming in 2 to 3 days per week. You're probably doing pretty well. So I would generally say for most people, again, this is something that's heavily nuanced. So questions like these sometimes are somewhat difficult for me to really nail down because I feel a sense of responsibility that if I'm going to answer the question, somebody may take the information and run with it. So I would generally say if you can get in 2 to 3 days, preferably 3 days per week, and you're getting in somewhere in the range of 10 to 17, 10 to 20 sets, working sets per muscle group per week, then we're looking pretty good. That is something that typically will help you either build or maintain a pretty solid amount of muscle. Your nutrition is going to be the primary driver there. Just hands down, your nutrition will be the primary driver. And don't get it twisted. Even if we're looking at a situation where the family schedule has now changed, and I completely get where you're coming from with that, being in a household where both my wife and I work full-time plus, then also our son going to be going into his last year of junior high, active, involved in sports activities, active social life. I totally get where you're coming from. And also looking at your training, we can make your training as efficient and effective as possible. It'll be it'll lean very heavily to like when you go into the gym, you're not there to just like screw around. You're in the gym to get the work done. So sometimes what I will find is as we're going through some different program reviews, getting ready for like onboarding a new client and getting an understanding of, show me what your training has looked like so far. Give me an understanding of what your workouts have looked like. And if they've got something, and then we're talking, okay, well, how long does it typically take you? Oh, well, probably about 90 minutes to 2 hours I'm in the gym. And I will tell you, I'm somebody who easily can spend 2 hours in the gym. I'm not working out for the entire 2 hours. And rarely am I finding that the folks who do spend 90 minutes to 2 hours, that they're really focused on training the entire time. There typically is some conversation with other people at the gym. There's some phone scrolling. There's some distraction, all those things that come with it. So if we're looking at how often, if we're looking at, hey, normally I train 4 to 5 days. For this upcoming quarter of the year, I may need to go to 2 to 3 days. We'll get it figured out, but we typically can get that done in probably on an average, I'd say about 50 minutes. Can be pretty solid with getting a good amount of work that's done with a well-designed program. So overall, what I would say, just on average, I'd love a sweet spot of 3 days per week for just about everybody. And then we would really take into account a really good understanding of what's happening outside the gym. I don't want to discount that. I think it's very easy for people to overlook what's happening outside of the gym and putting all of the focus and intensity and pressure on, well, I need the perfect workout. And I say this as the guy who's like all in on going like deep into the, like I said, the nitty gritty, right? Not the half gritty, the nitty gritty on workouts. A good portion of the results that you're looking to see are going to be dependent on what you do pre and post workout, not immediately, just outside of the gym, just in general. So generally, let's say 3 days a week should be all good. Granted, 10 to 17-ish sets per week per muscle group. All right. Last question was about rest days. So how can I stop feeling guilty for taking rest days? I know they're good for you, but I don't really feel like I need one. I'm pretty good at adjusting my intensity, and if I absolutely need to take one, I will. Okay. So for this particular one, there's not a number of rest days that people need to take. However, in this particular question, that's not what this particular individual is asking. They're asking, how do I stop feeling guilty? And I'm a big proponent of feel the feelings. So I think I strongly believe that step number one is to not try to stop a feeling from happening. Strong believer that when you try to stop a particular feeling from happening, that feeling just becomes more of a focus. And then if it does happen to occur again, that feeling comes up again, you begin to feel like a failure because you're like, snap, just now I'm feeling guilty. And so that means that I failed because this feeling is coming up again. And that's not something that I'm willing to co-sign. I am very, very big on you work through those particular feelings. And I say this with no formal education in counseling or therapy or anything of the such, or claiming to ever have that. Just a guy who tries to help people work through things and stay consistent with things in a way that allows them to show up the way that they want to for themselves and the people that actually matter. So I would first start with letting you know the guilt over taking rest days is more common than people think, and especially in high achievers. And I would even say not just high achievers or what people stereotypically think are high achievers. I think sometimes there's a stereotype of or a generalization that high achievers is that person who's the loudest person in the room, big person on campus. They walk in the building and they're just like beating their chest, like that sort of a thing. I have not found that to be the case. And I say that from an anecdotal standpoint in working with countless high achievers in multiple fields, not just for myself as a coach, also within the retail industry that I've been in. I've interacted with thousands of people at this point, and many of them very high achievers. And many times the high achiever is the strong, silent type. They're the person who is the head down, do the work. They're in a competition with you, but you don't know it. Like, they are going to beat you, they are going to outwork you, but they may never say anything to you about it. They are just going to continue to grind, grind, grind. So sometimes that rest can feel like they're going to be behind. Now, one of the things I want to point out is this particular individual said, I know that they're good for you. This is also a common misconception that just because you know something means that you know how to implement the thing. And clearly, that's not the case here. And I can intimately speak to this because I could have written this question myself a number of years ago. I don't know that I would have labeled it as guilt. It would have been more of a, I don't really think that I need to take it. Like, I'm just different. I'm special. Like, I'm Two Chains. I'm different. I'm just a different type of guy. I don't need to take rest days like everybody else does. And that was wrong. I was incorrect on that. So understanding, like, knowing and understanding and then implementing, just very different things. So what rest days do, for those who are not aware, taking time to rest, recover, and what I call recharge. And I just talked about this on the last episode. Like, I call them recharge days. That is where the muscle repair actually happens, and that is where your results really start to move along the path that you're looking for them to move along. So it's super easy to think that the more lifting that I do, the more running that I do, the more work that I put in, then I'm going to get better results. And what you are actually doing is when you are not allowing for the proper recovery and recharge time to happen, is you're delaying or diminishing the results that you're actually looking for. And I'm going to say that again, if I can remember the way that I said it, because I think that it's very important. The less and less that you spend time on recovery and recharging and repairing, then what's happening is you are either delaying or diminishing the results that you're actually looking for. So again, common misconception that, okay, well, if I train more, then I'm going to get more results. You may get results, but it's not going to be the results that you could get if you actually allowed your body to go through the recovery and repair process. Something that I would ask you to explore if you're feeling guilty about this, explore where that guilt is coming from. Is it coming from a fear of losing progress? Is it coming from something that may be identity based? This is one that for sure comes up when I'm talking to and interacting with people who others very easily identify as like their fit friend. Like, my fit friend so-and-so, my so-and-so friend, she's so jacked, he's so lean, whatever. Those individuals, and I'm saying this from personal experience here, and if there's somebody who's like, well, I'm not one of those people, then cool, you're not one of those people. I will just share with you that in conversations pretty regularly with folks, there becomes a attachment to the identity of being that particular individual. So there's this self-imposed pressure to always look a certain way and appear a certain way to other people. So that at that point, that means that that is a sign, potentially, that is a sign of attaching this guilt being attached to your identity being based on you being the fit person. So just get an understanding of first, where is that coming from? And then how can you start to work through that? I'm not saying like ignore it or, push past it or get rid of it. It's a matter of how do you start to work through that? Something else that I will bring up is the individual. Let me go back to where it was. The individual said, like, I'm pretty good at adjusting my intensity. This is something that I would say this was last year. So we're in 2025 right now. So throughout the year in 2024, something that my coach at the time, Jeff, and I worked on was the fact that I was like, yeah, I'm really good at auto regulation. And I believe this was even feedback that he had given me. He was like, yeah, you're pretty good at knowing when to adjust, when to like push, when to pull. I'm not literally push and pull, but when to adjust the intensity, because my schedule at times can be somewhat sporadic or unpredictable, especially when it comes to nutrition, specifically meal timing. Like on the days that I'm working my in-person job and then also trying to harmonize between other responsibilities that I have, meal timing is not a very strict thing. I have to fit it in where I possibly can within an 8-hour block. So at times that would lead me either feeling underfed or not as much energy going into the next day's training session. So I would make adjustments there. Be aware of something. Even when you are really good at what we call auto regulation, which in layman's terms is just adjusting the intensity of the training, just to keep it simple, sometimes you can be auto regulating too much, like over auto regulation, where, for lack of a better way to put it, you're not actually putting in the amount of effort that you could put in. Like you've auto regulated so that you can continue to wave the flag of I train 5 to 6 days per week, as opposed to I'm going to give this my all for 3 to 4 days per week. I'm not sure if I really said that correctly. It's just the picture that I am picturing here, and definitely have worked through this scenario, not only myself, with other folks. The picture that I'm picturing is, it's okay, well, I am currently doing a training split that is 5 days per week. And on Monday, I was all good. Tuesday, I was all good. But Wednesday wasn't feeling so hot, so I dialed it back. Thursday, I dialed it back. And then Friday, I dialed it back. And it's like, okay, well, then you end up having 3 out of your 5 sessions where you dialed it back, dialed it back, dialed it back. And 1 week, gotcha. 2 weeks, let's kind of notice what's happening. 3 weeks, that is now that's consistency at that point. Like if you're noticing 3 weeks in a row, there's 2 or more workouts where you're really needing to dial back the intensity, something needs to change there. So that's where the rest days, the recharge days, as the term that I use, would be really beneficial to put them in before you think you need them. This whole like, I'll take one when I need one, that works until it doesn't work anymore. And that might sound super obvious. It just, if you've been there, then you totally understand, because then when you do hit that point where like, yeah, I definitely need a rest day, you are like dead to the world, and it is rough, and it can be very, very difficult getting back into the gym. So let's say it's like Wednesday and you're like, I've been training for like 10 days without a rest day, and my body is just beat up, built, burned down, that I'm ready for a break. So you finally take the break, and then it's like you take the Wednesday off. So then getting to the gym on Thursday, you're like, man, I don't know why it's so hard to get into the groove. That's why and you tell yourself, well, that's why I don't take rest days, because when I take a rest day, it's really hard for me to get back in the groove. That likely is a sign that you took too long to take a rest day. I just got to be straight up with you. So, all right, slight soapbox moment, excuse me. So just want to make sure, again, when it comes to how do I stop feeling guilty for taking rest days? 1, stop trying to fight the feeling of feeling guilty. Let's reframe them as recharge days, and let's be on point about what you're doing during those recharge days. I think that there's a confusion, misconception, something like that a recharge day and or rest day, I call them recharge days, are where you're being asked to stay face down on the couch for the entire day. That is not what's happening here. Recharge days, think about it like this. What are things that I can do that will put me in a position to dominate my next training session? So I'll share with you for myself, those are days where I may do something like a zone 2 cardio, although that's part of my plan. So if I'm taking a full recharge day, like I'm not doing anything cardio wise, like no training whatsoever, then I will focus on getting a look at what's my next workout that's coming up. I'm thinking things fitness related, because obviously there's going to be other things that I can work on. I can read. Sometimes I will use that time to walk. Sometimes I will use that time to just max and relax, like read a book, listen to podcasts. Like that's probably one of the major things that I'll do, is that's when I'll set aside some time to actually listen to a podcast for myself, because I am somebody who has a job like in person in the retail field, and I also work online in the fitness space. It's not difficult for me to find things that I need to take care of on my recharge days. So just my strong recommendation to you would be to get an understanding of, like, a true understanding of how much you are really delaying your results and diminishing your results by not taking time to recharge so that you can dominate your workout. What you may find is that as you take 1 or 2 recharge days, you notice, okay, I can pack things on a little bit more. Now, don't expect that the first week or two that you start taking recharge days. Most likely the first week or two, what you're going to feel is, I feel worse the next day that I go back. Just as your body needs to adjust with an increase in training volume, your body, if you haven't trained much before, your body will need to adjust to the fact that you're actually resting and recovering. So keep that in mind also. All right, we are going to go ahead and close out here. I think that, yeah, that covered everything. So again, if you have additional questions, comments on today's episode, anything like that, feel free to reach out to me directly. Again, on Instagram, it's at Coach JK McLeod, MCLEOD, or you can email me, jk@jkmcleod.com. If you'd like to be a part of a free community that encourages habits like taking recharge days and also training pretty intensely. Today is Tuesday, the time of this recording and going out. So for us, our daily prompt today is a training Tuesday. So that's a day where in our free community called the Fitness Foundations Community, people are encouraged to share anything that they want to share from a training session this week, today, what they've got on their training menu, whatever the case may be. So if you would like to be a part of that free community, just shoot me, again, a DM or an email, and I'll send you the invite to join us. And with that, we are going to call it an episode. So thank you again for listening to the Help Me Understand podcast. Truly appreciate it. Take care, and I'll talk to you next time.